Oh, yep, it does.
Oh, there we go. Hello there. Welcome to Healing with Shawnalee and to the Wake Up with the Giants TV. If you have not read the book or if you're not a part of the tribe of giants, I invite you to go and do that now and get a copy of the book and learn what it is to be a giant. And just want to welcome you to the show. I have Joelle Lane with us and like to welcome her. She has her own podcast that I actually got to be a part of and was on an episode with her. And if you haven't or if you aren't friends with Joelle, I suggest that you go and join and then listen to Awaken to Heal podcast. She's a psychic medium. She works in hospice, and she's just a magical and fun. And I'll let her tell you just a little bit about herself as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you to everybody who's tuning in tonight or who will be tuning into this episode. Excited to have you with us as well. And yeah, a little bit about me. I am a psychic medium. I am a mom and a wife, and I have my own podcast, like Shawnalee said, Awaken to Heal. And I do work in hospice. So I'm a spiritual coordinator as well as a non-denominational pastor. So I work a lot with grief, as well as I'm a psychic medium. So I do a lot of readings for people who have had loved ones that pass. And we also deal with grief. So I guess you could say grief is really my niche, and it's really my niche in life. And it's really my thing that calls to me is grief. And working on both sides of the veil, I get to help people heal and before they pass, and then I get to help people heal after they pass. And so it's, a beautiful gift to be able to use that as a medium to work on both sides and to be able to connect those together and to help people understand that, these bodies are only temporary and there is life beyond. There is life after this. Our souls do go somewhere. After this, sometimes they come back to help us, and sometimes they go beyond, and sometimes they get to go enjoy what paradise is to them. So it's been a journey and it's been a gift, and I'm just happy to be here tonight to be able to share some of that with you all. So thank you, Shawnalee, for having me on. I'm excited to be here tonight with you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to, dive in and also get like your perspective, because you've also had very personal experience with this as well. And so I think that that's really important to talk about and discuss. And there's a lot of people who go through grief who don't understand what that is, don't understand you can carry it in your heart and have heart walls. You can go through so many different stages of grief. And like after my divorce, I was told by a friend, well, you're just going through grief. And I'm like, no, that was a good thing. And she's like, no, even though it's a good thing, it's like change. And so you can go through any and one of the stages, and you can be angry one day and the next day you're sad. And then the next day, like you think, oh, I passed all these steps, but then you could be brought back to one of those same steps at any point. And you think, oh, I'm healed. But then all of a sudden it can just turn. And I see with a lot of people, they can have judgments as they may not have gone through grief or the loss of someone that they loved. And, I've seen people say, well, you need to just get over that to other people. And it's like, no, grief is a very real thing. And we don't know what somebody's going through, especially with the loss of a loved one. And, you have that connection and you have that love, and all of a sudden they're not there anymore. And so then it can become very hard for people. And so you work in hospice, which, puts you right on that line and very up close and personal. And then you also have your spiritual business, and we'll kind of delve into both. But let's talk about the hospice a little bit and your experience and how you work with that.
Yeah, so hospice has always been something that has called to me. When I was in high school, my senior year, I did a CNA program, and where we did our clinicals was in a hospice center. And so I was, being a CNA, and I was, doing my clinicals in a hospice center in a hospice setting. And something about the elderly, I just have always connected with older people. I grew up with a single mom, and my grandparents, helped my mom raise me. So I spent a lot of time with elderly people growing up, and I just had this, I just have this connection to them. And working in a hospice setting, they're so excited if you're in like a hospice home, they're so excited to see people, and they're so excited to see their loved ones and their family members. And I just had this, calling like, yeah, I want to go be a CNA. I want to go be a nurse. I want to go help these people. And during my clinicals, I had someone pass away on me. And I wasn't aware of my mediumship at that time when I was in high school. I knew I could see spirit, but I wasn't aware of my gift. My gift wasn't very awakened yet within me. And when this person passed, I felt it. Like I felt this person that I had, become close with during my clinicals, this elderly person, this patient, and I felt them pass away. And I didn't know what this feeling was. It was like 48 hours being on my clinicals, so I had a lot of sleep. And I felt that, and I just felt so emotional and so painful after. And I remember going home and telling my mom, like, I can't work in hospice. I'm not ready to do that kind of work yet. And so I decided to go into a different field and do my degree through criminal justice and, victim advocating and things like that. And then coming, full circle with graduating from the University of Utah with my bachelor's degree in family consumer studies, and getting my pastorship through the Universal Life Church. I am now full circle coming back to hospice as a non-denominational pastor and a spiritual coordinator. So I still work with patients, but I get to work with them in a different way. And I get to go and comfort them and their families. And we talk about grief, and we talk about, what those feelings are. And for those of you out there who have, elderly family members, or maybe you have parents or someone in hospice, um, you're going to go through grief as soon as you begin that program, as soon as you step into hospice or bring a family member into hospice. That is truly when I think the grieving stages start to appear. That's when we start to kind of feel grief a little bit. Things become a little more real. And, we see a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings during, those months in hospice. It could be a few weeks, it could be a few months, it could be a year. Some patients are a few years. It depends on what's putting them in hospice. And so I talk to families. I talk to them during that time. I talk to them after our patients pass away, and we talk about grief and what that looks like. And then I'm there to support them, for as long as they need me. And then as far as my business goes, I get to help people connect with their loved ones who have passed away and connect with spirit. And so to be able to combine both in my job as the spiritual coordinator is, such a gift, because I do see spirit. And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, they said that they saw so and so, but that person's passed away. And I'm like, well, that person may very well be there to help transition them to the next phase in their life, to the other side. And so it's very validating to see that firsthand, and to experience that firsthand myself with family members who have passed away, who have been in hospice. My great grandma, who's my guardian angel and my spirit guide, she was in hospice, and she used to say she would see Jesus, or she would see Mother Mary, or she would sometimes see Archangel Raphael, or she would see her mother. And I, when I was little, would always see my great great grandma's ghost in my grandma's basement.
Oh, yeah.
And, when I remember my mom telling me, like, oh, grandma, she says she sees these things. And I'm like, well, she does. And my mom, I just remember being this eighth grade little girl being like, yeah, mom, she's really seeing those people, mom. And I have this photograph that I was taking after my grandma had passed away. I took a photo of her bedroom, and you can see someone sitting on the bed, like a perfect silhouette of someone sitting, on the bed. And I knew that was my grandma. And then, later on in life, I found out she was my guardian angel. She's my guide. She's here to protect me and guide me. And she helps me, live my purpose and helps me fulfill my purpose and guide me to right here, right now. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful gift to be able to help people who are seeing their loved ones pass, because that's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not. And when you've lost a loved one, just being able to experience them again and being able to know that their spirit is there is beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. My daughter, I had a miscarriage, and I didn't necessarily know that I was pregnant at that time. I won't go into like the specifics here, but we did on your podcast. But she, I found out that it was a girl, and I went, I was having my Reiki session done with my Reiki master, and she said, well, your daughter's here and she would like to express her sorrow for not coming. And then I got to express my sorrow for not being able to have her. But I got to name her. And the next day she came to me and she said, that's not my name. She said, my name is Anna. And, I'm one of your spirit guides. I'm your guardian angel. And I'm here for you. And it was just the most beautiful experience, is that we still get to have those experiences with, the ones that we've lost. We had a question from Hugh, and he said, do you see mourning different than grief? Where you're mourning?
So I feel like mourning and grieving are within that same family. They're, they go hand in hand, because when we're mourning, we're still grieving. We're still grieving a loss. And grief is really just any significant loss we've faced in our life. Grief, we don't just grieve when we lose our family members, when people pass away. We grieve and mourn when we lose a job, or maybe we didn't get that promotion we wanted, or we grieve when we end relationships, or we end friendships, or maybe we end a relationship with someone in our family. We grieve when we maybe don't meet a goal or an accomplishment. Financially, maybe some people are grieving the loss of money. Sometimes people grieve when they move to different places. We go through the feeling of grief and we mourn. We mourn those big significant losses. We go through those same feelings of grief. We go through those same stages, and we go through those same similar emotions. So to answer your question, I really think, for me personally, in my own perspective and view, I feel like they're kind of like one and the same, and they're within that like same family. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And like stages of grief, you could carry them in different parts of the body, like the chakras. Often I find that in the heart, when I'm working on somebody's heart space, and that they have heart walls that are put up. And heart walls are just energetic walls that are put up for protection, to keep, like that safe distance. You do it kind of unconsciously to protect yourself, instead of like having that heart open and it closes your heart off, and you have these walls that are up, and they can become very thick. And multiple times throughout your life, any type of trauma, any type of loss or things that can happen. And so when we remove the heart walls, we allow that to come open. And there could be many different things in the heart, as well as like anger and frustration and hurt. But grief is one of the big ones too, that we can have in there. And so just clearing that out, like I was carrying grief in my womb space, from that miscarriage. And so we can clear that out of the body, and then you can experience those different emotions and be able to feel fully. I know you also help, people with that. And, you do card readings as well, and you help, give the forecast, and you do so many different things in your business that can also help with that. And I'll let you go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah. So, when it comes to the other side of the veil, I, work with my clients, sometimes we forecast and we talk about, what that 6-month forecast is look like. What are the next 6 months going to look like for them? What things may come up? What energy may come up for them during this time? For some clients, that may be something we do quarterly, that may be something we do once a year. Or maybe it's just one time and they're like, you know what, that's good. That's all I needed. Now I have the guidance I need. Or we connect to spirit and we connect to their past loved ones. And, I've been in a few of my readings and, gone back and listened to some. And the comments that I get are, it feels like that person's sitting right next to me, as if you are talking and it's them sitting there. And I'm like, well, it really is them sitting there. You're not able to see them anymore, but their energy and they're still there. They're still there with you. And they'll try to send you messages to try and connect. All of your loved ones out there are always trying to connect with you beyond the veil. They are always sending you messages and sending you guidance, whether that be a song that reminds you of them, or maybe a penny, or maybe it's a feather, or maybe it's, a certain smell or a certain scent that you smell of theirs. Whatever that may be, they're always trying to connect with you. And sometimes they connect with you through oracle or tarot cards. I'm an oracle reader. I don't like to read traditional tarot. It's just not energy I'm attracted to. And then, I do heart wall clearings as well. And we do a heart wall clearing meditation where we clear those heart walls individually, and we're allowed, to go into that chakra and be able to clear some of those heart walls that we build. And grief is usually one that is very heavy emotion for people to feel. I know when I went through this last year, grieving all the losses that we did, I was very heavy in my heart chakra and very heavy in my sacral and solar plexus. I had also just come off of, having a baby in 2020. And so going through postpartum depression and then jumping right into grief and having that for like a whole year, and now feeling a lot lighter coming into this year. It definitely taught me a lot, especially within my own business, and being able to connect with people and let them know that their loved ones are still there, and knowing that my loved ones are still there, even though they're not here physically with us. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about my business. And, if any of you out there would like to connect, I'm happy to help you connect as well. So you just let me know.
Yes. We had a question from Hugh. It says, in your grief, are you experiencing the happiness, joy, love shared, or the trauma, hate, chaos that you shared with the loved one? I think that's personal too, depending on the person.
I agree. I think it's personal depending on the person, but I feel like you can experience all of those emotions while grieving. Because some of the things, that we encourage people to do when they are grieving is to connect back to feelings of happiness, feelings of joy, things that make you happy, like doing something for somebody else, helping someone, maybe filling your own cup up. So you can experience, and even sharing, your loved ones' memories. I think in society, and something that we, don't talk about is grief. We don't talk about grieving with our friends or, our family. Nobody wants to get uncomfortable and talk about this feeling that we don't like to feel. It's a very gooey feeling, and it's a very icky feeling and heavy. And, we don't want to be like, oh, hey, how are you grieving, today? It's a very awkward conversation to have. And so I think we push that down, or we feel like we have to do it alone. When really we need those people to help us process our grief. Whether that be someone like myself, like a spiritual coordinator or a pastor, or a non-denominational pastor like me, someone that you feel comfortable with, that can hold space for you, to feel the hate, the trauma, some of those other feelings, because sometimes that does happen with grieving, or that may happen with losing a loved one or ending a relationship. It could be traumatic. You may be holding on to trauma from that. And so I think it can be a very personal experience, depending on what you're grieving and what you're feeling during grief. But I feel like you can feel all of those feelings in different stages of grief, depending on where you're at and what you may be grieving.
Yeah. And then knowing when to ask for help, like
Yes.
when it becomes more than you, reaching out to someone. Pets can grieve too. You can have, like, kids don't quite understand it, but how would you suggest with kids on how to handle it?
Grief. Kids grieve just as much as we do, only they aren't aware of their emotions to communicate what they're feeling or why they're feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
For example, last year was a big year for us when it came to grief. I felt like that was like all our year was grieving. We lost 3 pets. We lost 4 family members. And so, it was really tough, especially on my son, because we had put down one of our dogs, Bubba's, and he was my son's dog. So him and my son were very close. And it was really tough for my son because he didn't quite understand. He knew our dog was sick, but he didn't understand like why he had to go away or why he wasn't going to come home from the vet. And so, I had a friend, one of my best friends, who had went through a similar situation, and she gave me, some advice. And I, kind of talked to my son about, I think as a parent, we have, there are times when we have to make the call to put down our pets, our loved fur babies, or cats, dogs, fish, whatever animal you have as a pet. And, kids kind of get to experience grief in that way. And there's an episode on Mr. Rogers and Daniel Tiger that we watched where Daniel Tiger, Mr. Rogers, has a fish and the fish passes away. And, they explain like, the fish he has passed on, and, we kind of meet. So I had my son watch those, and I watched them with him, and we kind of talked about the episode, and I kind of explained, well, this is what's happening to Bubba as he's sick, and he gets to go be with God now. He gets to go be with Jesus. He gets to go be with the angels. And, he's going to be up in outer space. And when you look out at night and when you see the stars, Bubba's is watching down on us. And then we watched the movie Coco because that was his favorite at the time. And that explains grief really well for children, I think. It kind of puts like the spiritual world into like perspective for them, because Miguel, he crosses the bridge to go see, his family members, and he gets to meet his family members on the other side. And so, I kind of explained to James, well, that's, Bubba's is going to the other side where, Miguel's spiritual family is. And he kind of understood it, and that kind of helped him process it a little bit. It helped put it in terms to where he understood. And, he'll still bring up Bubba's all the time. And it's okay for them to bring it up. We talk about Bubba's. We look at pictures of our dog, and we decided if we got a new dog, we would name him Bubba's 2.0 for Bubba's. And, we talk about Bubba's, and there are days when he feels sad and he's like, Mom, I'm just really sad about Bubba's. And I'll say, you know what, buddy, I am too. I'm sad about that too. Or some days he'll be really mad. And I'll be like, well, why are you acting mad, bud? And he'll just say, well, I'm just mad Bubba's isn't here. And I said, well, it's okay to be mad. And we validate their feelings, and it's okay for them to process it because they don't know what denial feels like. They aren't aware of anger. They can express anger, but they aren't aware that's what they're expressing. Kids don't really go through bargaining. They may go through depression. They may get really sad. And that's just something like parents should be mindful of. Then, they come to kind of an acceptance where they kind of realize, okay, well, that pet isn't coming back. They're no longer here. And maybe you can help them through that by doing like a little burial ceremony, or letting them go be a part of putting your dog down. Your dog doesn't want to go alone. There was an article that veterans had posted, like, staying with your pet so to help ease them to the other side. And, when we put down Bubba's, we stayed with him until his very last breath. And that was very hard. And I grieved that as well. And then, right after our dog passed away 2 months later, we lost my grandpa, my son's great grandpa. And lost my aunt, and my cousin committed suicide, all within about the first 5 months of 2021, last year. And It was really hard. James went through a lot of emotions and he still goes through them. We go and visit my grandpa's grave whenever we are back home, and he'll bring up my grandpa and he'll just be like, oh, well, Papa is up there with Bubba's eating ice cream today. And I said, oh, well, what else are they doing there? Or
Yeah.
he'll say, well, I'm pretty sure I saw Papa in the house today, or I saw Bubba's today. And I'm like, I bet you did, buddy. And validating that kids are very open to spirit. They can see spirit. And so they're very mindful and aware. And so it's just something I do is just validate his feelings and we talk about it. And
Yeah.
we kind of move through those things of grief together. And, that's just what you can do as a parent is just allow your kid to feel their feelings and feel your feelings in front of your kids. I think that's really important too. That gives them the validation to express their feelings as well. So,
Yeah. And then that way they know. Hugh asks, so how often should the topic of death be discussed among the family? Only once it happens or before, so there can be an understanding and freedom to act accordingly? Like what's the best before, after, if you...
It depends on the situation. If it's like hospice, I would say before and after. And then whenever someone brings it up, no, it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's okay to talk about it. Yeah, it might not be a comfortable conversation, or it might stir up some feelings in you that maybe you're not ready to feel. That's why grief is so hard, because it stirs up those uncomfortable emotions that we aren't used to expressing openly. And so I would say if it's in a situation where, you're kind of preparing, or if like someone's in a hospice like setting, then you're probably going to have that conversation quite often, because that's going to be a topic that's going to come up a lot. If it's something like a suicide, you're not really prepared for a suicide. There's no really preparing for that. So that conversation usually comes up after, or, if someone passes away all of a sudden, that conversation would come after as well. Take the last 2 years, for example. I mean, a lot of people had very unexpected deaths, right?
Yeah.
So
last couple of years. Yeah.
the last couple of years since 2020. And
Yeah.
so those conversations, usually happen after, because those aren't things we've expected, or it wasn't something we were expecting. With my grandpa, we weren't expecting him to go, because he had just had surgery the weekend before. I was just down there before he had passed, and he was fine. So his passing was very unexpected. I could feel something was still off as a medium. Like I could pick that up, and I kept telling my mom, like, something's still not right. Like I feel like I should stay longer, but I couldn't, due to my own life and responsibilities. And I knew he wasn't going to be around much longer after my visit. And once he went back into the hospital, like for me, that was confirmation that what I was feeling, what I was seeing, was going to happen. And so I was able to prepare myself a little bit, but not a lot. And being a medium, we see death before it happens. We feel it before it's coming. I don't know when, I don't know how, but usually I can sense it before it happens. I sensed my grandma on my dad's side passing away. I knew for months, like, she was sick, and I knew that she wasn't going to be around much longer. And I kept, telling my cousin, like, hey, is she okay? Is she still there? And then I finally got that call, and I was like, I felt that coming.
Yeah.
But, to have those conversations about death, it really depends on the situation. But that's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also, like, what are your suggestions for those who turn to like numb the pain? That could be food, that could be alcohol, that could be anything really, on how to get through that.
You gotta first have mindfulness and awareness that you're in that stage of numbness, right? That you're numbing yourself.
Yeah.
I had been, after my grandpa passed, my cousin, my aunt, putting down dogs, I was, numbing myself through just mindfully, not even scrolling on social media, just spending hours scrolling. That's a numbing agent nowadays for most people.
It is.
Coping mechanisms. And it depends on what you're scrolling, and it can be healthy or unhealthy. I think it becomes unhealthy when you're using it to avoid things. It's not really helping you move forward. It's really holding you back. I feel like that's when numbing agents become unhealthy. And another numbing agent I used, and I talked about this on Bianca Noss podcast, on the Freedom Seeker podcast earlier this month, is I had been drinking. And I had been numbing myself drinking. And I was like, wow, this is really unhealthy. And I had become aware of it. And I was like, you know what? I need to quit. And I could hear my grandma, my guardian angel, being like, hey, this is something you need to stop. It's not helping you. It's hindering you now. And so I made the choice, back in August, to quit alcohol completely. And I haven't had a drop since. And it's, that's been a journey all on its own. But I was aware that I was using it to numb my feelings because I just could not stop crying about my grandpa. I cried every day, randomly. I would hear a song and I'd cry. My son would bring him up and I'd cry. I'd come down into my room and I'd cry. And then I was just trying to drink to avoid crying and to avoid those feelings. And then I was doing it in a very unhealthy way, to where I wasn't doing it in social settings anymore. It was, at random times, and it was very unhealthy. And so I realized, hey, this is no longer a healthy thing I'm doing. I'm numbing this to avoid these feelings. And so once I brought that awareness, I was able to make that decision to stop. And I don't regret quitting, and I don't want to drink anymore. I'm so much better without it. And yeah, you have to be aware that you're in that place of numbing, because you can get into a really dark place. You can unpack your bag into numbing. And that's when you usually get into that depression phase. And a lot of people unpack their bags when it comes to grief and depression. And then they use those numbing tools to not only cope with their grief, but now they're doing it to cope with depression. And that can just lead to a very dark place to be in. And you have to have support or people in your life to hold space for you to be able to say, hey, we're a little concerned, or we're a little worried about you. Or say, hey, I think this is getting out of hand. My husband is usually my best mirror. He will let me know, hey, you may need to stop doing this, or this is what I'm seeing. I'm bringing this to your awareness. And, having those conversations, because in society, there's numbing agents in your face constantly. I mean, all you see are commercials for alcohol. And for someone who's grieving, or someone who's in a, that stage of grief, and they're seeing these alcohol commercials constantly, they may think, well, maybe that drink might taste good, and maybe that drink will temporarily get rid of these feelings I don't want to feel. But then you're going to be feeling worse, the next day, depending on how much you are drinking. Or maybe you're using substances, or overly, you're so much on social media that you're escaping life and you're not living life anymore. Or maybe you're isolating yourself and you're numbing yourself in other ways. I mean, there's so many things out there that you can numb yourself with. But our society doesn't promote any ways to heal yourself, at least not in
the mainstream. Yeah.
Not in the mainstream. It's always things to keep you down, or, people see alcohol as really a lifter, but really it's a downer when you look at it from a chemical standpoint, or a substance standpoint. And so it's just really bringing your awareness to being in that stage, or having someone around you in your life to be able to let you know, hey, I'm a little concerned. You might be in this phase of grief.
Yeah.
If you are, talk to somebody, reach out to someone, anybody.
Yeah. He was saying that this is he listens to the shows, and he was like, if there's anything that either one of us could do, Joelle has definitely been through grief, and she's one, if you feel like you need to reach out to, we're kind of like considered alternative therapy, or like Reiki is considered a spiritual practice. And these are alternatives to counseling and alternatives to things like that, where with energy healing, we're both energy healers, that most of us have found that that has been very effective, where years of counseling hasn't been. And I'm not saying that like there's one preferred over the other. It really just depends on the person and the work, but definitely getting the help that you need if you need help. And just being aware that there's people who really care, and they care about you, and definitely want to see people heal and to get past whatever is holding them back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And grief it's a universal feeling. We all have grieved something. Everyone has faced a significant loss of some sort.
Yeah.
And grief is not like this linear journey where you go through all the stages and then you're done. You can go through all the stages in one day. Grief is like a roller coaster, or like the ocean. Some days it's really calm and it's really nice and you're fine, everything's great. And then all of a sudden something can come up and it can trigger you, and you just get slammed with all these waves of emotions and feelings. And like you said, the energy work, I think my Reiki, doing those sessions with different Reiki masters, you were one of them.
Yeah.
It really helped me process my grief, and having mentors and coaches who allowed me to hope to be in grief while doing these different programs that that I took and that I was in. Two of those amazing people are Petra McDougall and Shell. I took both of their courses last year, and during some really heavy parts of my grieving and my grieving journey, and they they just allowed me to just be and to just breathe and allow those feelings and those emotions to come up. And, whenever you're doing work with women or in a sacred space with women, like being here on the podcast, or doing a program together, we've done programs together.
Yes.
And just being in a sacred space where you are allowed to be vulnerable and to feel your feelings and to let your feelings show up is so healing. Because sometimes, people may not feel comfortable going to a counselor or going to a therapist.
And might not have insurance.
Sometimes, they may not have insurance. A lot of people out there don't have insurance. And so, what do those people do for people who don't have insurance? How do they get the mental health that they need, or the things that they need for grieving? How do we provide services for those kind of people? And that's where, our services come in, because sometimes it is like a therapy session. When you do go in for a Reiki session, a lot of things come up, and feelings and emotions, and we talk that out. And or even in a reading, a lot of that gets unpacked in a reading session too sometimes. And those can be very beautiful spaces if you're grieving, to allow someone who has the ability to connect with the other realms, or the ability to connect with spirit, or to connect with your chakras, feelings, and emotions, and help you energetically. And that's such a beautiful thing. And that's now getting brought into some hospitals. There are some hospitals in our country who are now.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Just a second. It's live TV. I think that's my daughter. 1 second. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Hello there. I'm on my podcast.
Oh, would have been nice to know.
That's okay. It happens. It is live TV, right? It's all good. I'm glad that my daughter's here. So, yes. So, therapists and grief counselors, work with them and get help wherever you need it. And so we talked about grief, and we talked about like your work with the other side. And I also wanted to talk about like the rebirthing, and how your intentions this year, how you were able to turn that around and rebirth into something new.
That's such a beautiful thing. And, last year was really my year of grief. That was like my shadow for the entire year was grief and feeling the feelings of grief
Yeah.
and really allowing myself to really be in those feelings, be in those feelings of denial, um, anger, let myself express my anger, or my bitterness because I'm a projector and now I understand where my anger comes from. Bargaining, I didn't really go through a lot of bargaining. I did hit a depression point and I was aware that I was in that stage. And I was like, oh, I've unpacked my bag here. Um, and then I came into acceptance and then, finding meaning, finding purpose. Well, how can I have my grief be my teacher? How can I let it teach me? What is it trying to teach me? And grief really teaches us about forgiveness. It teaches us unconditional love because really grief is just love that has nowhere to go. It has nowhere to be
Mm,
expressed.
I love that.
And when we grieve, especially when we're grieving loved ones, um, it's just love that we can no longer give to that person. So it has nowhere to go. And so that love gets displaced into different feelings and different emotions. And that love is just, grief is just love at the end of the day. Anger comes back to love. Depression, denial, acceptance, it's all love at the end of the day for whatever we weren't able to give our love to, or maybe we weren't able to give our effort to, or, whatever significant loss you're facing out there.
Yeah.
And how I really worked through that was staying committed to the modalities and the healing tools that had helped me all the years. Um, Getting regular Reiki sessions done, especially when I was feeling really heavy or I was feeling really lost. I knew I could go to the Reiki masters that I know, and have them clear me up. And I usually get a tune up once every few months because I'm a medium and I need that tune up anyway. And so that really helped me process my grief, journaling, doing yoga and meditation, connecting to my spirit guides, my guardian angel, my great grandma, because she knows how much of the loss of my grandpa was. It was like losing a dad. So I didn't just grieve my grandpa. I grieved as if I had lost my father because he was my father figure in my life. And so I went through those feelings of grief as well. Um, and, talking to other people who were also grieving, doing my hospice work and talking to families who were grieving and just sharing my own grief with them really helped me process my grief. Um, my son, one of my sons had a surgery last year and I was, in the waiting room and this lady had asked me, what I had done for a living. And I told her and I, worked in hospice. Then we had got to talking about, these last 2 years and COVID and things like that. And she had lost some people to COVID. And, I was like, oh, I, had lost some people as well. And, just talking to her about grief. And she's like, after this conversation, she's like, I really feel good. Thank you so
Mm,
much for chatting with me today. And I was like, oh, you're welcome. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And she's like, people like you are really needed. People need to talk about their grief. And she's like, thank you for allowing me to talk to you about mine. And it felt really good. Just a random person sitting next to me in a waiting room and
yeah.
just randomly helping them. And that made me feel really good. And, doing things like that and sharing the memories of our loved ones still. And, um, doing all those things and working with coaches and mentors and taking programs that allowed me to connect to pleasure again, allowed me to connect to feelings of joy. Um, and being around my friends and my family, I think that was like the biggest thing that really got me through grief was the support I had from friends and family, especially my friends who were very close to me who live out here because I live away from my family. And I had to really rely on my friends and my best friends who are out there. I don't know if they're watching, um, but they know who they are. And they had just really held space for me to grieve and to be messy when I needed to be messy. And if I needed some time away, they understood. And, they always checked up on me and to make sure I was doing okay. And having that support from like my mom and my sister-in-law and my husband and my kids, of course, and being able to support them equally, helped me get through grief. But you can't go through it alone. And that's the biggest thing I would encourage anyone. If you are grieving by yourself, I would encourage you to reach out to someone like me, reach out to me, reach out to someone like Shawnalee, or, reach out to a pastor if you're not going through deconstruction of religion. Or if you're comfortable with religion, reach out to your pastor. That's what they're there for, to talk to you about grief. Reach out to a grief counselor. And if you can't find a counselor, reach out to a spiritual person who's dealt with grief.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of support groups out there. There's books. David Kessler is amazing to follow on Instagram and Facebook. He coined the term for grief. He was on Nick Cannon's show not too long ago, helping Nick Cannon go through the grief and loss of his son. And David Kessler is someone who I've studied in college, and I study now because my boots are on the ground in grief, in the field of grief, working in hospice. And I often rely on his books to kind of help guide me in my own job, and in my own grief. And he coined the term for grief and the 5 stages, and the 6th stage is, finding purpose and meaning, and really understanding that there is spirit on the other side. Everyone has loved ones out there who are looking out for them beyond the veil, beyond this body. And just knowing that your loved ones are out there to still support you and to still be there for you. And even though we may not be able to see them, that doesn't mean that they're not there. So doing all those things really helped me get over my grief, especially the heaviness of grief. I still go through the stages, and especially coming up on like 1-year anniversaries, you're probably going to have a lot of those triggers come back up. My grandpa's 1 year was last month. Actually, no, it was this month on the 11th. And, it was really tough. That week was very triggering for me. So I gave myself a lot of space that week. I did things that really nourished my soul that week that made me feel good. I took some time off social media. I spent a lot of time with my kids and getting outside and things like that. So, I was able to kind of connect to those feelings of joy and then allow myself to feel those not so fun feelings like crying. And, I cried watching, I can't even remember what movie I was watching, but I just started bawling, and my husband's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, this movie is just so sad. And I was like, I gotta go. And I had to come downstairs here into my office, and just cry because I was just flooded with emotions. It was a movie my grandpa really enjoyed watching, and this song came on. It was Toy Story 2. And there's a song in there that comes on, and it just had me in tears.
Yes.
So I was like, I gotta go. And my husband allowed me to feel my feelings. And so another thing that really helped me that I still use that I'm drinking tonight is cacao. Cacao has been such a healing thing for me. And I started microdosing on it after my grandpa had passed, because I knew that would help open up my heart, and it would help me heal through grief. And I still drink it today. I usually drink a cup a day, and it has really helped me move through grief because it's really supported our heart. It supports our heart chakras. It supports, our whole body. And that's really been, such a help as well. So.
Yeah, cacao I love. It's chocolate. It's the most beautiful heart medicine, and it is just a heart opener, and just so magical. Beautiful, beautiful medicine. There's cacao ceremonies just set up for this specific intention, but you can also buy it for yourself to drink. Like I drink it every night. There's beautiful different blends and that. I think we use the same company. It's Firefly, but now I think it's called Aura.
Yes.
And there's many different intentions of and it's the kind where that we buy, it's ethically traded. This is what that community does, this is their way of living, is they take care of the cacao plants, which is chocolate. And then they take it over, drop it off in their sacks. they go back, and then that supports and helps their community. And this is what they do. So it's all about that. They pray over that. So it has those intentions in there. And so it's really nice just to sit with a cup of cacao and just open your heart. And oh, wow, it's a magical, beautiful experience. So I love that you brought that up too.
Yes, I love cacao. It, like you said, it's so healing for our minds, our bodies, and our souls. And I have a cup usually every day. I'm drinking some right now, and it just really helps, it helps our hearts, and it helps support our hearts, especially when we're in grief. It just adds that extra warmth to our heart that we need, because in grief, our heart chakra gets so bogged down, because grief is like so heavy. And when you look on like the emotional ladder and like an emotional scale, grief is like almost one of the very last emotions on the emotional scale or the emotional ladder. And so it can be very hard for someone who's on this grief, feeling at the very bottom of the ladder. How do they get all the way up to pleasure, which is at the very top? And you're not going to get to pleasure overnight.
Yeah.
You got to tap into some other feelings. Maybe that's peace. Maybe that's contentment. Maybe that's calmness. Maybe that's forgiveness. And really anchoring into some of those other feelings. Then once you get to those, then start tapping into those other things and start to layer upon that. There's so many things that you can do to support yourself during grief. And there's just so many ways that you can support yourself during grief, and know that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk about grieving. It's okay to talk about, those feelings. We got to start talking about those things in order to heal those things as a collective. When we avoid talking about the things, we avoid healing. And so, we just gotta, it just keeps it bogged down. And on a collective level, if we choose not to talk about the grief, the hurt, the pain, and we choose to sweep it under a rug or we ignore it, then that hurt and that pain just gets added to. And we got to start talking about that so we can start to heal on a collective level as well.
That's kind of what you're seeing in the outward world right now, is the shadow aspects, that everything that was not exposed is exposed. And so that forgiveness, we talked about forgiveness. I'm doing a Ho'oponopono ceremony on Saturday where we're going to drink cacao. And Ho'oponopono, if you have not heard of this prayer, it's just four sentences. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And that is just such a healing prayer. Like you just going into the mirror, looking yourself in the eyes, that will totally like reset you. But the thing about the Ho'oponopono is you can repeat this mantra or prayer, however you want to call it, but it will cleanse you. And you're cleansing the memory of whatever transpired. And not only does it heal you, but it heals that other person. And then it heals anybody else who has that same thing. And so you can go through and not only help yourself, but help everyone else. And there was a gentleman in Hawaii. He's a doctor, and he was in a psych ward. And they asked him, well, what did you do for these psych patients? Like, how did they heal? And he said, I didn't do anything to them. I didn't, change anything. I didn't do anything out of the extraordinary. I just cleansed myself. And they said, well, what do you mean? And he said, I just repeated, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you, over and over and over again. Because what comes in our outward world is what's going on in the inner. And so as he cleansed himself, he was actually healing them too. And they were all healed completely and wholly. And so anyway, I can go off on tangents too. I just felt like that needed to be said. Like just even something as simple as that can help heal, and know that you deserve that forgiveness and that love, and you deserve to just fully like feel those feelings, but know that you're doing a good job. And like you have to sometimes be your best advocate and give yourself that extra love. Give yourself those things. Like sometimes we don't receive from the outer world. You have to be the one to do it for you. And then guess what? It automatically just shows up in that outward world from other people because you're giving it to yourself first and you're putting yourself first. Abandonment is not about others. It's about us abandoning ourselves. Yeah. And a lot of us had maybe that abandonment scar that came up as children. And so healing that and forgiving those moments that maybe even we thought. You do a lot of inner child work, which was another thing that I wanted to bring up with you as well. It's like, loving that inner child, that inner you, that little you that didn't get that love or maybe felt rejected or maybe thought they weren't enough. Like these are definitely some things I know that we both work on with clients, is helping them to overcome those things for the inner child and doing those things for the inner child. I love you are posting things all the time, like jumping on your trampoline, and I'll let you talk about the inner child.
Yeah. And the inner child comes up so much during the stage of grief, especially if you've lost a loved one, like a parent, or maybe a grandparent or someone you were close with in your childhood. When you grieve the loss of them, that's often your inner child coming out and, grieving as well. And I remember, the week my grandpa was passing, my inner child, my inner teenager, was out. I had lost my great grandma when I was in 8th grade, and very similar passings. There's, a connection there. And I could just, when my grandpa, during this week, I was just feeling this, like these feelings that I remember feeling back then. And I was like, oh, my inner teenager is out. Like I was listening to a lot of like emo music, things I was listening to, like, in high school. I was wearing a lot of black, and I hadn't been noticing. I have a lot of black in my wardrobe anyway, but I hadn't been noticing I was consistently wearing it until one of my friends pointed out. She's like, "You're going through like a really emo-y phase right now." And I was like, "A what?" And she's like, "You're wearing a lot of black these days." And I was like, oh, I am. And I was like, oh, like my teenager is very coming out, because that's kind of who I was as a teenager. I listened to a lot of emo music. I was going through a lot of stuff back then as well. And then, my younger inner child, my young self, would come out as well and be very sad and very upset. And I had to really connect to those, feelings of joy through my inner child by connecting with my own children, doing things that filled me up. My friend was selling a trampoline, and I was like, done, I'm going to go buy it. And I bought the trampoline, and me and my son jump on our trampoline, and we get out there as much as we can and jump on the trampoline, or, going to the park, or painting, or dancing, or, whatever feelings you liked or whatever you enjoyed doing as a kid, try connecting back to that as an adult. Whether it be like going to the park, maybe go and get yourself like a hula hoop. Do things you enjoyed as a kid. Go buy a trampoline. Go jump on a trampoline. Go play some laser tag if that feels good to you. Go to the arcade. I have kids, so I get to go do those fun things with them and kind of let my inner child come out to play. But if you don't have kids, connect to things that you enjoyed as a kid. Maybe it was a movie that you really liked watching and it made you laugh so hard as a kid. Watch it as an adult. Go painting, dance, move your body, shake it out. Maybe connect to music you listened to as a teenager, right? Get nostalgic with yourself. Do things that make your inner child happy, and that'll really start to heal you as well. But I love how you brought up Ho'oponopono, because that is something that I have been working through now, and working through forgiveness. And last year I was able to kind of forgive myself, because I think oftentimes when we grieve, we feel a lot of shame, we feel a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes with self-love, and we really have to love ourselves and nourish ourselves and forgive.
You're good.
Okay, I'm back. So sorry. We had to really love and forgive ourselves first,
Yeah.
before we can forgive other people. And now I'm working on forgiving other people. When I was grieving the loss of my grandpa, I wanted to blame the doctors, and I was mad at them because I didn't feel like they did enough. Um, or they didn't catch all the things I was feeling or felt like my grandpa had. I was mad at my family members for not communicating things or things that happened during the funeral. And I, was mad. I was just mad at everybody. I was just angry. And I was just like, well, why aren't they supporting me? Or why are they doing this? Or why did they do that? And oftentimes we can get so caught up in being angry and being mad at other people when we lose somebody. And sometimes we really have to work through that forgiveness. And, that's kind of where I'm at now, is working on forgiving others.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that doesn't need to be a conversation between you and that person. Like you said, you could do the ho'oponopono and work on forgiveness that way. And that's what I've been doing because I'm not quite there to have those conversations yet. I'm not in a space to where I'm ready to have those conversations yet without feeling other feelings that I would be bringing in, like anger and resentment. And so I'm, still working through some of that as my inner child is working through those things too. And, Ho'oponopono is like such a great way to nourish yourself, especially if you aren't ready for those conversations yet, or you're just not there for that yet.
Yeah.
It can really be healing for you and for them. And so, whenever I have these feelings come up towards these people in my life, I put on Ho'oponopono, like a meditation, and I write their names down and I say their names. And then I say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And I just repeat that over and over and over again. And, by the time I'm done, I feel better. I feel energetically better. Even with my son, when he has feelings of anger that he projects onto me, I'll do the whole Ho'oponopono for my kids, and heal their little hearts. And so, yeah, that's such a beautiful way to like help cope with grief, especially with forgiveness. If you're in that part of grief, then that's, a really great way to kind of work through that and cope with that.
Yeah. And express that love. And
express that
now
love.
that I've done that, and it's such a natural habit. I just tell people, I love you. Thank you. And and it just comes up so naturally. And they're just like, well, I don't have that kind of relationship. No, I just love you, right? It's not romantic. It's just, I just love you. And so it just comes out, but you can be talking to somebody and also like it'll distress like a situation that you might be in, just repeating that in your head. You don't even have to say it aloud. It helps that as well. Yeah. Is there anything that we left out that you want to leave people with?
So the one thing I do want to leave people with is how you can cope with grief and just some ways to cope and ways to remember your loved ones. We have Easter coming up in April, and that could be a holiday that can often stir grief up in people. In a lot of ways. So often holidays are a time when people get triggered, especially if you've lost someone prior to this holiday coming up. This may be a first holiday for you, or, this could be a holiday that may trigger some other feelings of grief when it comes to leaving a religion or being a part of a religion. We often grieve during those times as well. And so some ways that you can, remember your loved ones is, like we've already talked about, talk about your loved ones. It's okay to talk about them. They're right there. They want you to talk about them. They want you to share their memories, and they want you to still know that they're there. They want their memories to live on. Write about your loved one. Journaling is often very healing when it comes to grief. If you are not able to openly express your emotions and your feelings and talk those out verbally out loud, maybe journaling is something that can be helpful for you. Focus on your favorite things. Maybe if you did lose somebody, focus on their favorite recipe or their favorite place to visit, or their favorite thing to do, focus on those memories. If it's a holiday, or maybe you're used to eating dinner at the table together or eating meals together, it's okay to still hold their place, to still put their settings up. That can be a very healing thing for people. I know for my grandpa at Thanksgiving, they had a place for him at the table. At my cousin's wedding, she wanted a place for my grandpa to be there still. And so it's okay to hold their place. It's okay to hold their place wherever you're at.
Yeah.
Look at old traditions. It's okay to incorporate those old traditions still and to still do those things. Life still goes on after you lose a loved one. And I know it's hard for some people to hear, but they would want you to do those things still, to have those traditions or even create new traditions. And that's okay too, because life may look a little different without them not here. Other ways to cope are feel your feelings. I think we've talked about that a lot this evening, about feeling your feelings and knowing that it's okay to feel. It's okay to be sad, to be mad, to be angry, to feel all the feelings, to feel happy, to feel joy. Sometimes people feel guilty about feeling happy and joyful after they lose somebody. It's okay to feel those feelings too. It's okay to feel all the feelings. Helping others, acts of service usually make us feel good. Maybe donating to your favorite charity, going and doing volunteer work at like the Humane Society or a shelter, or maybe getting out in your community and doing some sort of active service. Maybe even if it's paying for a meal and someone who's behind you in the drive up line, just doing a simple act of service can like change your whole entire day. Being healthy, be mindful of your own personal health during stages of grief, because oftentimes we forget to eat. We may not take care of ourselves. Sometimes we may not brush our teeth or brush your hair or things like that. So just be mindful of your healthy habits and try to continue those. And if you don't, it's okay to ask for help. Looking for support. So calling your friends, your family, maybe a pastor, someone like me or Shawnalee, or, a counselor, a therapist, whatever is your support system out there. And if you don't have any of those support systems, we can be your support system. So look for support. You got to have it. It's so important to have that support out there for you. And honoring your own needs. I think that is so important. And one we tend to forget about is honoring your needs and respecting your need. Whether that's the need to stay in touch with people or the need to have like your own needs. Sometimes people, find themselves in loss and they're afraid to they're afraid to leave a crowd or not to show up to an event or things like that. Honor your needs, honor your yes and your no. Especially when grieving, because sometimes crowds can be very overstimulating for people who are grieving, or big family events. And if you have someone out there who is grieving in your life, it's okay to still invite them, but don't have the expectation of them coming. Just put the invite out there and say, hey, I know you're grieving. I know you're having a hard time, but we would love to be here for you. We can even have a room for you to escape to if you feel the need to do so. And allowing them to still be able to grieve, but still be able to feel welcome, among a crowd. I went to my friend's baby shower not too long ago, and I had been feeling emotional that day about my grandpa because it was like the week after his 1 year, and some emotions and feelings had been coming up for me. And I was holding it all in at the baby shower, like putting on my smiling face and, nodding my head and acting like nothing was wrong. And, my friends didn't really want to ask because they could feel my energy. Being a projector, you can definitely feel my aura. And so right at the very end, my two friends were like, okay, what's going on? And then I finally broke down and they're like, there. I'm like, I didn't want to ruin your baby shower. It's your day. I didn't want to distract you, take the attention off of you because I'm sitting here being sad. And, they were like, it's okay. It's just the two of us now. We're here for you. And, they allowed me to feel my feelings. So honoring your own needs and having, again, that support system there for you is so so important. And there's so many other ways that you can cope with grief, but those are some of the main ones that I always encourage. And again, it's talking about it, not being afraid to have that conversation, and just finding someone that's safe to have that conversation with, that can hold space for you.
Yeah, that's open, and you've showed us that tonight. So I appreciate that. Such a beautiful conversation, and I feel like we could go on forever. And just, if you're out there, if you come upon this, just extending our love and our gratitude for you, and you're here for a reason. And don't forget to, that you too are needed, and that you're here. And, we need your light just as much. And so thank you. Thank you, Joelle. So beautiful. I love you.
I love you.
Lane Spiritual Healing, as well as Awaken to Heal podcast. She does card readings, so many other things just besides grief too. So,
yes, connect. If you want to connect, feel free to add me. Find me on Instagram. Facebook is usually where I hang out the most, is between Instagram and Facebook. And the Awaken to Heal podcast is on, all major podcast platforms. And yeah, we're here to have those conversations and to get gooey and uncomfortable with you. And, don't be afraid to reach out, especially if you are grieving. These last 2 years have been so hard on everybody, with the pandemic, and then coming out of the pandemic and going into some other crazy things we're in right now. Everyone has gone through grief of some sort, or maybe you're going through it right now. Just know that there's support out there for you, and know that you're needed here on this planet. If you are feeling, suicidal, please reach out to anyone, someone. And if you are grieving in the loss of a loved one and you don't feel like you can talk to anybody, please reach out to me or Shawnalee or someone here to help assist you, or find amazing spaces like this space that Shawnalee is holding, and tune into these shows. I tune into them myself, and that's another thing that's really helped me, is listening to podcasts and books of self-help and things like that, and working with all the healing modalities that I have in my own toolbox. And just know that we're here to support you in a judgment-free zone where you can be messy. You can feel those messier feelings. As healers, we're here to hold that space for you. So always reach out. We're always here for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying up late with us. We hope you have a good night, and I love you.
Love you.